My daughter told her world I was broke. A charity case. A sweet but embarrassing mother she had to financially support. She built her entire glittering career on a foundation of pity for me. So I did the only thing a broke, pitiable mother could do. I waited, I planned, and I bought the office building she worked in. Now I'm her landlord. And let me tell you, rent is due on the first of the month. That if you believe that the quietest people can have the most epic comebacks, then do me a favor and press that like button. And subscribe to this channel, because the story I'm about to tell you is a testament to the fact that you should never, ever underestimate the person who packs your lunch. It's a lesson my daughter is learning every single day, in the beautiful corner office she no longer truly controls. Part 1. The Death by 1,000 Cuts. Before the glass walls and the condescending smiles, there was just us. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was solid, built on the bedrock of routine and quiet sacrifice. My alarm went off at 5:15 a.m., a gentle chime that I'd always hit before the second ring. In the pre-dawn quiet, the house smelled of brewing coffee and the faint, clean scent of laundry soap from the load I'd put in the dryer the night before. I was 42, but some mornings, my reflection in the dark kitchen window looked closer to 60. The fine lines around my eyes weren't from laughter, they were from squinting at spreadsheets at the community bank where I worked as a loan processor. The gray strands at my temples weren't a style choice, they were artifacts from the years my late husband, Tom, was sick, and the years after, when I worked a second job on weekends stocking shelves at the grocery store just to keep the mortgage paid on time. I didn't resent the work. It was my purpose. It was how I kept the lights on, how I put food on the table, and how I had managed to pay for every textbook, every application fee, and the security deposit on the first grown-up apartment for my daughter Claire. Claire. She was my whole world. My opposite in every conceivable way. Where I was earth, she was fire. I found comfort in predictability, she thrived on chaos and competition. From the time she was little, she had a hunger in her that I never quite understood. She didn't just want to win, she needed everyone to see her win. When she graduated top of her class in communications, I sat in the audience, my hands raw from clapping, tears blurring the sight of her in that cap and gown. I had never been so proud. She rocketed through the corporate world. While I was processing car loans for local families, she was landing six-figure accounts for a boutique public relations firm called Ascend. It was the kind of place where the employees wore clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment and talked about synergy and brand activation. Their office was at 278 Hudson, a gorgeous old brick row house downtown, renovated with so much glass and steel it looked like a diamond someone had dropped in the middle of a cobblestone street. Claire loved that building. More specifically, she loved her corner office on the third floor. It was her stage. She curated her life on social media from that very spot, posting photos of herself looking powerful against the backdrop of the city skyline. She'd be holding a flute of champagne, or laughing with clients who looked like they'd just stepped out of a magazine. She was everything I wasn't, polished, visible, and important. And I was, for a long time, her biggest cheerleader. The shift was subtle at first. A slow, creeping chill in her tone. It started with little comments. "Mom, that sweater is cozy. Maybe something a little more modern for the family dinner." Or, "You don't need to tell people you work at the bank. Just say you're in finance. It sounds better." I brushed them off. She was just trying to help, I told myself. She lived in a different world, a world of appearances, and she wanted me to fit in. The real crack in the foundation came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The air was crisp, and the leaves were turning that perfect shade of burnt orange. I'd had a surprisingly easy day at the bank and decided to use my lunch break to bake Claire's favorite, homemade lemon bars, dusted with a thick layer of powdered sugar. It was a silly, motherly thing to do, but I missed the simple days when a pan of these could solve any problem. I packed them carefully in a Tupperware container and drove downtown. Walking into 278 Hudson felt like entering another country. The air smelled like expensive perfume and espresso. Young, impossibly stylish people rushed past me, talking into their phones with a clipped, urgent rhythm. A receptionist with razor-sharp eyeliner looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my sensible shoes and my 10-year-old trench coat. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with practiced boredom. I'm here to see Claire Harper, I said, holding up the container. I'm her mom. Her expression softened, but only into one of pity. Oh, of course. Let me just buzz her. Claire met me by the elevator, a perfect, painted-on smile on her face. Mom. What a surprise. She kissed the air next to my cheek, her eyes darting around the lobby to see who was watching. She took the container from me and guided me quickly toward her office, her hand on my back feeling less like an embrace and more like she was herding livestock. Her office was stunning. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the park. A sleek white desk held nothing but a laptop, a phone, and a single perfect orchid. It didn't look like a place where work happened, it looked like a set. She took a lemon bar, nibbled the corner, and laughed. It was a sound I'd begun to dread, brittle and high-pitched, like glass about to shatter. These are amazing as always, she said, wiping a dusting of powdered sugar from her perfect lipstick. But Mom, she lowered her voice, her smile tightening, you really shouldn't just show up like this. People are watching. I just wanted to bring you a treat, I said, my own smile feeling stiff on my face. I know, it's sweet, she said, placing the lemon bar on a napkin and pushing it aside. It's just, the narrative here is very specific. My team, my clients, they all have a certain impression of my background. I frowned. What kind of impression? She sighed, running a hand through her silky, expensive-looking hair. She wouldn't meet my eyes. They know you're a single mom, that you worked hard, that things have been tough. She paused, searching for the right word, and the one she landed on felt like a physical blow. They think you've been living on handouts for years. That I support you. They think you're, she made a face, a grotesque mixture of pity and scorn that twisted my stomach into a knot. Practically bankrupt. Bankrupt. The word came out as a whisper. It felt alien in my mouth. I had never missed a mortgage payment in my life. I had a modest 401k and a savings account I meticulously contributed to every single week. I had put her through college without a single dollar of debt. I wasn't rich, but I was the furthest thing from bankrupt. I was solvent. I was self-sufficient. I was the one who had given the handouts. It's fine, she said quickly, already moving to open her office door. It actually works for my brand. The self-made woman who overcame the odds and now takes care of her struggling mother. It's relatable. It makes me look benevolent. She was ushering me out now. Look, we'll talk later. Just try not to embarrass me, okay? Love you. The door clicked shut behind me, leaving me standing in the hallway, the echo of her words ringing in my ears. Benevolent. Struggling. Bankrupt. I walked out of that building in a daze. I don't remember the drive home. I remember sitting in my car in my own driveway, staring at the house I had worked my fingers to the bone for. The Tupperware container of lemon bars sat on the passenger seat, untouched. A story. She had created a story. A fiction where I was the damsel in distress and she was the knight in shining armor. That night, the wound deepened. I couldn't sleep, so I did what we all do in the dead of night. I scrolled through my phone. And there it was. A photo of Claire and me from a charity gala a few months prior. She looked radiant in a black gown. I was in my best and only formal dress, smiling proudly at her. I remembered that night. I had felt so happy for her, so in awe of the world she had built. But her caption stole the air from my lungs. It read, "So blessed to have my family supporting me at the launch party tonight. Especially my mom, working hard as always. It's an honor to be able to give back to the woman who gave me everything, even when she had nothing left." The comments were a sickening cascade of praise. "You're such an amazing daughter, Claire. What an inspiration. Taking care of your mom like that. She must be so proud of you for lifting her up." Lifting me up? She was standing on my shoulders and calling herself tall. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a calculated, public lie. Every like on that post was a small, sharp jab in my heart. She hadn't just told a few colleagues a white lie to make herself look good. She had broadcast it to the world. She had taken my life's work, my stability, my pride, my quiet dignity, and erased it. She had painted me as a pathetic figure in the background of her heroic journey. The humiliation was a physical thing. It was a hot, creeping flush that started in my chest and spread to my face. This wasn't just about my feelings. This was dangerous. I worked at a bank. My entire professional life was built on financial credibility. A rumor like bankrupt could poison the well, could make my bosses look at me differently, could make my clients hesitate. My daughter, in her careless, selfish pursuit of a better narrative, had put my livelihood at risk. My first instinct was to call her. To scream, to cry, to demand she take it down. To lay bare the raw, gaping wound she had just carved into me. My hand hovered over her contact photo, my thumb shaking. But then, I stopped. What would happen? She would apologize with that same brittle tone. She would say I was overreacting, that it was just for optics. She would gaslight me into believing that my pain was an inconvenience to her career. Nothing would change. She would just be more careful about what I saw. I put the phone down. The tears of hurt that had been welling in my eyes began to dry. And in their place, something else began to form. It wasn't hot and messy like anger. It was cold. It was quiet. It was methodical. She thought I was powerless. She thought I was a prop. She thought I had nothing. That night, sitting alone in the kitchen that I owned, under the roof I had maintained, I made a decision. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't scream. I would plan. I would show my daughter what a bankrupt woman with nothing left to lose was truly capable of. The narrative, as she called it, was about to get a new author. And I was holding the pen. Part 2. The Architecture of a Grudge. The weeks following the lemon bar incident were a masterclass in quiet torment. Claire would call, her voice bright and breezy as if nothing had happened. "Hey Mom. Just wanted to check in. How are things?" Each cheerful word was a new layer of insult. She was acting out a play where she was the dutiful daughter, and by refusing to confront her, I had been cast as the silent, appreciative audience. The lie was a living, breathing entity now, occupying the space between us. It sat at our sparsely attended family dinners and whispered in my ear during our stilted phone calls. The true test came at Thanksgiving. My sister, Carol, hosted that year. The house was filled with the warm, familiar smells of roasting turkey and cinnamon. For a few hours, I almost forgot the cold knot in my stomach. I let myself sink into the familiar comfort of family, of nieces and nephews running underfoot, of the easy banter between my siblings. Then, my Aunt Martha cornered me by the dessert table. She was a sweet woman, but her face was etched with a profound, misplaced pity. She placed a comforting hand on my arm. "Evelyn dear," she said in a stage whisper, "I just have to tell you what a wonderful girl you raised. Carol was telling me how much Claire helps you out these days. It's just so lovely to see her taking care of you after all your struggles." The air went thin. I could feel every eye in the vicinity drift toward us. My slice of pumpkin pie turned to ash in my mouth. I saw Claire across the room, watching the exchange. She had a small, beatific smile on her face, the kind a saint might wear while tending to the poor. She gave me a tiny, encouraging nod, as if to say, "Go on, play your part." My sister Carol looked uncomfortable. Martha just kept patting my arm. "You just let her spoil you," she continued, oblivious. "You deserve it." What could I say? Actually, Martha, I own my own home, have a stable job, and paid for Claire's entire education. She's constructed a manipulative fiction to advance her career? I would sound insane, vicious, ungrateful. So I did what I had to do. I smiled a tight, brittle smile that felt like it might crack my face in two. "She's a good daughter," I managed to choke out. The shame was suffocating. It was one thing for strangers on the internet or colleagues I'd never meet to believe this lie. It was another for my own family to look at me with those soft, pitying eyes, seeing me as a feeble dependent. Claire hadn't just humiliated me, she had demoted me within my own family, recasting me from the reliable matriarch to the family charity project. I drove home that night in a silent fury. I replayed that moment with Aunt Martha over and over in my head. I saw Claire's smug, pious expression. "It's for my brand," she'd said. "My life, my reputation, my dignity, were all just raw materials for her to build a brand upon. That was the night my grief finally curdled into resolve. The hurt was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but it was now overlaid with something harder, something with an edge. For 2 years, this feeling would be my fuel. My revenge couldn't be a simple confrontation. Words were Claire's weapons. She could twist them, turn them, and make me sound like the villain in seconds. No, my revenge had to be structural. It had to be irrefutable. It had to be something she couldn't spin. It had to be written in spreadsheets and legal documents, not in tearful text messages. My first step was deceptively small. I saw a flyer pinned to the bulletin board at the library. Community college night courses. Enroll now. Tucked between ads for pottery classes and yoga was a listing, Introduction to Small Business Finance and Real Estate. The first night of class, I almost turned around and went home. The classroom was in the basement of the main building, painted a nauseating shade of pale green. The air was stale, and the fluorescent lights hummed a dreary, monotonous tune. I was 20 years older than everyone else in the room, including the professor. The other students were bright-eyed kids hoping to flip houses or start an Etsy shop. I was a 42-year-old bank employee with a secret, burning grudge. I felt ancient and absurd. But I stayed. I opened my fresh, clean notebook and uncapped my pen. The professor, a man named Mr. Davies with a passion for amortization schedules, started talking. And I listened. I absorbed everything. I took meticulous notes. I did every piece of homework. I stayed late to ask questions. While Claire was at cocktail parties networking, I was at my kitchen table with a calculator, learning about commercial leases, property taxes, and the beautiful, brutal logic of leverage. I kept my main job at the bank, of course. My steady paycheck was the engine for everything. But my second job, the weekend shelf-stocking gig, I quit. I replaced those hours with something else. I started attending local real estate investor meetups. They were usually held in dusty VFW halls or the back rooms of cheap restaurants. The attendees were mostly men in ill-fitting suits who talked too loud about their portfolios. I never spoke. I just listened. I learned the language. I learned who the players were in our city's commercial real estate scene. I learned which developers were over-leveraged, which landlords were notorious for neglecting their properties, and which brokers had the best reputations. It was during one of these meetings that I first heard the name Marco Velez. He wasn't one of the loud ones. He was a quiet man who sat in the back, nursing a single club soda for the whole 2 hours. Someone mentioned he was the sharpest commercial broker in the city, specializing in off-market deals and distressed properties. He didn't find you a building, he found you an opportunity. Finding his office took some work. It was a small, unassuming place above a bakery. There was no flashy sign, just his name in small gold letters on the door. The office smelled of old paper, strong coffee, and the faint sweet scent of baking bread from downstairs. Marco was maybe in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a calm, measured way of speaking. He listened to me without interruption for a full 10 minutes. I didn't tell him the whole story, of course. I just told him I was a long-time bank employee with a significant amount of equity in my home, looking to make my first commercial real estate investment. I told him I was interested in a specific part of downtown. He looked at my financials, which I had prepared in a neat, professional binder. He nodded slowly. "You're in a good position, Evelyn," he said. "Your debt-to-income ratio is pristine. You've been disciplined." He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with respect. It was such a foreign feeling that I almost cried right there in his office. "What kind of property are you looking for?" he asked. I took a breath. "Something in the Hudson Street Historical District," I said, my voice steady. "Brick building. Good bones. Mixed-use potential." I was describing 278 Hudson, of course. For the next year and a half, Marco and I had a standing meeting every other Friday. He'd show me properties. A small storefront here, a duplex there. I looked at all of them seriously. I ran the numbers. I learned. But none of them were the right one. All the while, I was watching 278 Hudson like a hawk. I knew the name of the LLC that owned it, Riverbend Properties. I knew they owned 3 other small commercial buildings in the city. I knew from my research at the city records office that they were leveraged to the hilt. The owner, a man named Arthur Finch, had a reputation for buying beautiful historic buildings and then deferring all but the most essential maintenance to maximize his cash flow. Meanwhile, Claire's star continued to rise. Her firm, Ascend, landed a huge tech client. They got a write-up in a major trade publication. Claire was quoted. There was a picture of her, standing in her glass office, looking out at the city like she owned it. Every post she made, every success she celebrated, was another twist of the knife. She seemed to have forgotten all about her struggling mother. I had served my purpose in her narrative, and now I was back to being invisible. It was, I realized, even more insulting than the lie itself. Then, in the early spring of the second year, the dominoes began to fall. A major downtown employer announced layoffs. 2 of Arthur Finch's other buildings lost their primary tenants in the same month. Rumors started to circulate in the real estate newsletters I now subscribed to. Riverbend Properties was in trouble. Finch was scrambling. The bank was getting nervous. I was in Marco's office one rainy Thursday evening when he slid a file across his desk. It was thinner than the others. On the tab, in his neat handwriting, were the words 278 Hudson. My heart started to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. Finch is bleeding money, Marco said, his voice low. His lender is calling the note. He needs to sell something fast to raise capital, or they'll foreclose on his entire portfolio. He's looking for a quiet, fast, all-cash buyer to take Hudson Street off his hands. He's willing to do a short sale, well below market value, just to make the problem go away. He opened the folder. Inside was the property summary, the current tenant list, the rent roll. I saw Ascend PR, Suite 300. I saw the number for their monthly rent, and a bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. Marco looked at me, his expression unreadable. It's a big lift, Evelyn. Even with the discount, it's at the absolute top of your range. You'd have to leverage everything. I stared at the numbers on the page. I thought about the fluorescent lights of the community college classroom. I thought about the condescending men at the investor meetups. I thought about my Aunt Martha's pitying eyes. I thought about the untouched lemon bars in their Tupperware coffin. And I thought about Claire's face, framed by the skyline in that glass office, looking down on a world she thought she had conquered. Leverage everything? I already had. Every bit of pain, every sleepless night, every ounce of humiliation, I had leveraged it all into this single moment. I looked up from the file and met Marco's gaze. My voice didn't shake. Make the offer, I said. And Marco? There's one condition. My name doesn't appear on any of the initial paperwork. We'll file the final deed under an LLC. And absolutely no one, especially not the tenants, is to be notified of the change in ownership until after the ink is dry. He nodded slowly, a small, knowing smile finally gracing his lips. I understand perfectly, he said. Discretion is paramount. I sat in that plastic chair, the smell of rain and coffee and old paper filling the air. I was terrified. But for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't just planning. I was acting. The trap was about to be set. And the bait was a beautiful 4-story brick building on Hudson Street. Part 3. The Quiet Acquisition. The 2 months that followed were a blur of calculated risks and sleepless nights. Buying a commercial building isn't like buying a house. It's a war fought with paperwork. There were environmental reports, title searches, structural inspections, and stacks of legal documents so thick they made my head spin. Every day felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon of failure. To make the down payment, I had to do something that felt like a betrayal of my past. I had to sell the small portfolio of stocks my late husband Tom had left me. It wasn't a fortune, but it was our someday money. Someday we'll take that trip to Italy. Someday we'll renovate the kitchen. Selling it felt like closing a door on a life we never got to live. I sat in front of my computer for a full hour, my cursor hovering over the liquidate button. I thought of his easy smile, of his belief in me. He would have wanted me to be happy, I knew. But more than that, he would have wanted me to be respected. He would have hated what Claire had done. With a deep breath, I clicked the button. The money, our someday money, flowed into my account, ready to be weaponized. The rest of the financing came from a home equity line of credit on my house, the very house Claire assumed I could barely afford, and a small business loan from a rival bank where no one knew my name. I was a faceless applicant, just a credit score and a set of financials. And my financials, thanks to decades of frugal, responsible living, were impeccable. The loan was approved in less than a week. Marco was my general through it all. He handled the negotiations with Arthur Finch's desperate team. Finch, as predicted, was in a hurry. He didn't ask questions about the buyer. He just wanted the check. Marco structured the deal through a series of trusts and holding companies that kept my name completely buried until the final moment. The LLC I'd created was named Harper Holdings, a small, private nod to the family name Claire had tried to rebrand. During this time, I had to maintain a perfect facade of normalcy. I went to work at the bank every day, processing car loans and smiling at my colleagues. I answered Claire's weekly check-in calls, my voice calm and even. "How are you, Mom? Everything okay?" She'd ask, the question a hollow formality. "Everything's fine, honey. Just keeping busy," I'd reply, looking at a stack of inspection reports for 278 Hudson sitting on my kitchen table. The irony was so thick I could taste it. There was one close call. One Saturday, I was downtown with Marco, doing a final, discreet walk-around of the building's exterior. We were examining the brickwork on the side alley when I heard a familiar click-clack of heels on the pavement. My blood ran cold. It was Claire and two of her colleagues, heading out for lunch. They were laughing, absorbed in their own world. I yanked Marco back into the shadow of a doorway, pressing myself flat against the cold brick. My heart hammered against my ribs. They walked right past, not 10 feet away, Claire's voice cutting through the air. And then I told the client, "Look, if you want premier placement, you need a premier firm." They signed the next day. Her arrogance was a physical force. As her laughter faded down the street, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Marco looked at me, an eyebrow raised. "A little close for comfort," he murmured. "You have no idea," I breathed. The closing was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. It wasn't in a fancy boardroom. It was in a sterile, anonymous title company office out by the airport. Arthur Finch wasn't there, he sent his lawyer. I was there with Marco. The room was silent except for the shuffling of papers and the scratch of pens. I signed my name, Evelyn Harper, on what felt like 1,000 documents. Each signature was a quiet declaration of war. I pushed the cashier's check across the table, a single piece of paper that represented my entire life savings, Tom's legacy, and the value of the roof over my head. The lawyer on the other side didn't even look at me. He just checked the numbers, grunted, and slid a heavy brass key across the table. The key to 278 Hudson. I held it in my palm. It felt impossibly heavy. "The deed will be recorded with the county by Monday," Marco said as we walked out into the bright afternoon sun. "As of this moment, Evelyn, you're a commercial landlord." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel giddy. I just felt still. For 2 years, I had been a whirlwind of secret activity, of studying and planning and hoping. Now, the first part of the mission was complete. The building was mine. The power had shifted, silently and irrevocably. No one in the world knew, except for me and Marco. I spent that weekend in a strange limbo. On Saturday, I mowed my lawn and pruned the rose bushes. On Sunday, I did my laundry and paid my bills. It was the same routine I'd followed for 20 years. But everything was different. I was no longer just Evelyn Harper, bank employee and grieving widow. I was Harper Holdings, LLC. I was the owner of one of the most prestigious small office buildings in the city. I resisted the urge to drive by the building 100 times. I resisted the urge to call Claire and listen to her voice, knowing what I knew. Patience. The entire plan was built on patience. A grand, theatrical reveal would be satisfying for a moment, but it would be messy. It would give her an angle to spin it, to paint me as erratic or mentally unstable. My revenge, like my planning, had to be quiet, professional, and devastatingly precise. It had to happen on her turf, in her world, using her language. The language of business. I waited 2 full weeks. I let the sale settle. I had Marco's firm officially take over as the property management company, sending a generic form letter email to all the tenants of 278 Hudson. Dear tenant, it began, please be advised that as of this month, management of the property at 278 Hudson will be handled by Vallis Real Estate Services. Please direct all future rent payments and maintenance requests accordingly. I knew Claire wouldn't even read it. She didn't deal with things like rent. A junior employee in their accounting department would handle it, changing the payee name in their system without a second thought. During those 2 weeks, I planned my final move. It couldn't be an email or a phone call. It had to be in person. It had to be a perfect bookend to the incident that started it all. I went to the bakery below Marco's office and ordered a beautiful, custom-made apple pie, the kind with a perfect lattice crust. A thank you pie, I would say. A little treat for the team. A gesture from the sweet, simple-minded mother. The following Tuesday, I put on my best blouse and a pair of trousers that were, for me, a splurge. I did my hair and put on a touch of lipstick. I wanted to look respectable, but not out of place. I wanted to look like Evelyn Harper, the bank employee. The woman they thought they knew. I drove downtown, the pie sitting in a box on my passenger seat. This time, I didn't park a block away. I pulled into the small private lot behind the building, into the spot marked Building Owner. It was empty. I put my car in park and just sat there for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel. 2 years. 2 years of biting my tongue, of swallowing my pride, of studying until my eyes burned. 2 years of channeling every ounce of hurt and humiliation into a singular goal. It all came down to the next 30 minutes. I picked up the pie. I got out of the car, walked to the back entrance, and used the heavy brass key. It slid into the lock with a satisfying, solid click. The door opened, and I stepped inside. I was no longer a visitor. I was home. I walked up the back stairwell, my sensible shoes making soft, confident sounds on the steps. I could hear the murmur of office life through the walls. On the 3rd floor, I pushed open the door to the main hallway. The same impossibly chic receptionist was at her desk. She looked up, a flash of recognition and pity in her eyes. Mrs. Harper, she said, her voice a little too loud. What a surprise. Can I help you? I gave her a warm, gentle smile. I'm just here to drop something off for Claire and the team, I said, holding up the pie box. She's not in a meeting, is she? She is, actually, the receptionist said. A big one. Potential new client. But they should be wrapping up any minute. Oh, that's fine, I said, my voice betraying nothing of the thunderous beating of my heart. I'll just wait over by her office. I walked down the hall and sat on the plush leather couch directly across from Claire's glass-walled office. I could see her inside, commanding the room. She was mid-pitch, pacing in front of a large screen, her gestures sharp and confident. She looked powerful. She looked untouchable. She had no idea that the foundation she was standing on had already shifted beneath her feet. I placed the pie box on the table next to me and folded my hands in my lap. The trap was set. The bait was laid. And now, all I had to do was wait for my daughter to walk into it. Part 4. The Execution and the Fallout. The meeting broke about 10 minutes later. A group of serious-looking people in dark suits filed out of the conference room, shaking Claire's hand as they left. Claire was electric, flushed with the thrill of a successful pitch. She walked them to the elevator, her laughter echoing in the polished hallway. When she turned back, she finally saw me sitting there. Her professional mask dissolved into one of mild annoyance, quickly replaced by a saccharine smile for the benefit of her colleagues who were now milling about. "Mom!" she exclaimed, rushing over. "You came. What's this?" She gestured to the pie box. "Just a little thank you for the team," I said, my voice even and calm. "I had some extra apples. I know how much you all work." I was playing my part perfectly. The doting, slightly clueless mother. "That is so incredibly sweet of you," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Aren't these just divine?" she asked a junior account manager who was passing by. The young woman nodded eagerly. Claire was soaking in the credit for being such a good daughter to her simple, baking-obsessed mother. She leaned in closer, her smile becoming a little more strained. "You really should have called first, Mom," she whispered. "This isn't a great time." "It will only take a minute," I said, my gaze steady. I stood up. My heart was a hummingbird in my chest, but my hands were still. "Actually, Claire, do you have a minute? I'd like to talk to you about the lease." The words hung in the air between us. Claire blinked, her practiced smile faltering. "The lease? Mom, what are you talking about?" "The lease is handled by corporate. Isn't everything fine?" This was the moment. The pivot. The instant the entire dynamic of our lives would be permanently altered. I reached into the simple, unassuming handbag I'd carried for years. It was the same bag I'd had with me when I brought the lemon bars. But this time, I didn't pull out a wallet or keys. I pulled out a slim, professional-looking folder. I placed it on the coffee table between us, right next to the apple pie. The juxtaposition was not lost on me. "Open it," I said softly. With a confused, irritated frown, she flipped open the folder. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a crystal-clear, notarized copy of the recorded deed for the property at 278 Hudson Street, listing the new owner as Harper Holdings, LLC. The second was a formal letter, printed on heavy bond paper with the Valles Real Estate Services letterhead. It introduced me, Evelyn Harper, as the principal and sole proprietor of Harper Holdings, LLC, and the new landlord to whom all future correspondence should be addressed. I watched her face. It was like watching a film in slow motion, a series of micro-expressions cascading one after the other. First, sheer, uncomprehending confusion. Her eyes scanned the documents, her brain refusing to process the words. Then, a flicker of dawning awareness, a tiny spark of horror in her eyes. It was quickly followed by alarm, and then, as the full implication hit her, a wave of dark, undiluted rage that turned her cheeks a blotchy red. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous tremor. "This is some kind of joke. You can't just—" "I can," I said, my voice still quiet, yet it seemed to cut through the entire office hum. "And I did. The sale closed 2 weeks ago." Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Around us, the office atmosphere had changed. The ambient chatter had died down. People weren't openly staring, but I could feel the weight of their attention. The junior account manager was frozen mid-step near the doorway. The hiss of gossip was as audible as a snake in the grass. This was her stage, and the play had suddenly gone terribly, terribly wrong. You bought the building," she finally stammered, the words sounding absurd even to her. "The whole building? How? Why would you even? Why?" I let the question hang there for a beat. I looked past her, into the glass office where she had dismissed me, where she had called me bankrupt. Because I was tired of people assuming they could define me. Because I was tired of being the footnote in someone else's story. And, I added, my voice becoming crisp and businesslike, because the previous owner was distressed, and it was an excellent financial opportunity. I could have sent a check and remained anonymous. But I wanted you to know. I thought it was important that we be transparent with one another, as landlord and tenant. The word tenant landed like a slap. Her face crumpled. For a single, fleeting second, I saw the little girl she used to be, lost and overwhelmed. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the hardened fury of a queen who had just been overthrown in her own court. Just then, a distinguished-looking older man I recognized as the firm's CFO walked over, a look of bewilderment on his face. "Claire, is there a problem?" he asked. Before Claire could answer, I extended my hand to him. "No problem at all," I said, giving him a warm, professional smile. "Evelyn Harper. I'm the new owner of the building. I was just introducing myself to my daughter." I deliberately left out the part about being her mother. The CFO's eyes widened. He looked from the documents on the table to me, then to Claire's thunderous face. He was a numbers guy. He understood power and money. He didn't see a simple old mom. He saw an investor who had just pulled off an incredibly savvy acquisition. He broke into a broad grin and shook my hand vigorously. "Well, I'll be," he said, laughing. "Congratulations. Arthur Finch has been letting this place go for years. We're thrilled to have an owner who might actually invest in the property. A pleasure to meet you." That was the final, crushing blow for Claire. To be invalidated not by me, but by her own colleague. To have my power confirmed by the very world she revered. She turned, her face a mask of pure fury, and stormed off, not to her office but to the stairwell. The slam of the fire door echoed through the now silent office. The aftermath was a tempest. Claire didn't come back to the office that day. That evening, my phone began to ring. The first voicemail was pleading. "Mom, call me. We need to talk about this. There's been a huge misunderstanding." The second was angry. "What were you thinking, humiliating me like that in front of my entire company? You've ruined everything." By midnight, they had descended into venomous, incoherent rage. "You're trying to destroy me. After everything I've done for you. You are a selfish, manipulative." I stopped listening. She emailed Marco, demanding an explanation, accusing him of unethical behavior. He replied with a polite, legally vetted letter stating that he had acted in his client's best interest and that all aspects of the sale were legal and confidential. She whispered to her colleagues that I was just a puppet, a front for some wealthy investor, that this was all an elaborate stunt. But it didn't stick. Because I started acting like a landlord. I had the leaky faucet in the second-floor kitchenette fixed the day after it was reported. I had the lobbies faded, flickering lights replaced with bright, modern fixtures. I had the windows washed. Small things, but they spoke a language of competence and care that Arthur Finch never had. People noticed. The formal lease negotiation was the true crucible. Claire was forced to sit across a boardroom table from me, her company's lawyer on one side, and me and Marco on the other. She tried to posture, to talk about market rates and comps. I just listened patiently. When she was done, I slid a proposal across the table. It was for the exact fair market rate, not a penny more, not a penny less. It included standard clauses for maintenance and upkeep. And it included one special clause I had insisted on. One that gave the landlord, Harper Holdings, LLC, right of first refusal and final approval on any and all changes to the space, including signage, subletting, or structural renovations. I now controlled the physical evolution of her brand's headquarters. She had to sign it. Her signature on the check each month, made out to Harper Holdings, was a fresh humiliation. It was a tangible, recurring reminder that the power she thought she had was built on a foundation that I now owned outright. The climax came 3 months later, at the building's first official tenant meeting, which I hosted in the newly refreshed lobby. I provided coffee and pastries from the bakery downstairs. Claire stood in the back, her arms crossed, her face a thundercloud. During the Q&A, she stood up, her voice high and defiant. "I just want to make something clear to everyone," she announced, her gaze sweeping across the other tenants. "This situation is a temporary misunderstanding. My mother is not my landlord. This was all some kind of mistake." A tense silence fell over the small crowd. They looked at me, then at her. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at my daughter, the architect of my 2-year ordeal, and I smiled a small, sad smile. "It wasn't a mistake, Claire," I said, my voice soft but carrying in the quiet room. Then I added, just for her, "But you're welcome to correct your tone." She never did apologize. Not in words, anyway. But her actions changed. The snide comments in staff meetings, which I heard about from other tenants, stopped. The checks arrived on time. And sometimes, late at night when I'd drive by, I would see the light on in her corner office. I'd see her silhouette, staring out at the city she so desperately wanted to conquer. And I'd think of the lemon bars and the closed door, and the quiet dignity that I had finally painstakingly bought back. I never wanted to crush her. I just wanted to be seen. Owning 278 Hudson wasn't about the money. It was about authority. It was about the long, patient, irrefutable proof that underestimating the person who gets up at 5 a.m. every single day to keep the world turning is a very, very costly mistake. When people ask me how it feels to own the building, to have pulled off such an incredible feat, I don't talk about revenge. I don't talk about victory. I just laugh, a real laugh this time, free of bitterness. It feels, I say, like finally being invited to my own life. Revenge isn't always about fire and fury. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is quiet. It's structural. It's rewriting the story someone else tried to write for you, using your own ink, on your own terms. My daughter wanted a narrative? Well, now she has one. She's the tenant who works in her mother's building. What do you think? Was this revenge justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because everyone has a story, and some of the best ones end with a signed deed.